Hey, what's going on, folks? Welcome back to the Graphic Design is Fun podcast. My name's Dan. Today, we got an awesome episode today. I'm really stoked that I had the opportunity to chat with the wonderful, talented Danica Mitchell. Danica is a graphic designer. She runs her own studio, Finletter Creative, and she's just overall a badass, quite frankly. She's a rock climber. She's a world traveler. She does it all. And we had a great conversation. We talked about her background studying industrial design at RISD and then ending up getting a job in graphic design, and then a few years later deciding to start her own studio. We talk about her time living in Japan, Okinawa, Japan, for almost 3 years, and how that also had an influence on her as a designer. We also talk about specializing as a graphic designer as opposed to sort of being more of a generalist, having your niche, and why Danica is somewhat anti-niche. But all this and much more in today's episode with Danica Mitchell. Hope you enjoy. So I want to talk to you a little bit about Finletter Creative, your studio, which actually, by the way, is that your middle name?
Yes, that's my middle name. It's like an old weird family name.
Because I was curious, it seems like so perfect for you, don't you find?
Yeah, it's funny because when I started it, I didn't do any lettering at all. And then like everyone kind of assumes it's like a play on lettering.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's just like an old family name. And my thought was like, it's super unique. No one else is gonna have it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome. It's got like a great ring to it, and it just like fits your vibe. And I mean, it's funny though that you weren't really doing lettering, because now you do like a lot of kind of like custom typography and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about your studio, but I guess going back to like the origins of how you got started, you studied industrial design, not graphic.
Yeah.
At RISD, which is pretty fancy.
Yeah. Fancy. Some people know it and some people don't, I found. But
yeah,
it's like a well-known art school, I guess. If you're tapped into the art world, you've heard of RISD. If you're not, you're like, really, what?
So like, did you, I guess I'm just curious because like, so were you into industrial design like in high school, or like what made you want to like pursue that?
It was kind of a winding journey. The program I was in was actually a dual degree program with RISD and Brown. So I had two majors essentially. And my original plan as an 18-year-old getting out of high school was to do psychology at Brown and painting at RISD. But at RISD, you go through this like very, very intense, they call it foundations, is your freshman year at RISD, where they kind of just like throw everything at you, like, full day studio classes. You don't sleep at all because you're always trying to get your projects done. So it's everything from drawing to what they call like, it's basically like a sculpture 3D course, but they call it like spatial relations or something stupid like that. To like, they just like try to get you exposed to everything your first year. Right. And that's when I realized that I actually really liked like working in 3D and problem solving, a lot more so than I liked fine art, which my mom and my sister are both painters. So for me, that was kind of like, oh, like that's art. And then, my eyes were opened up to, the design world. I ended up going with industrial design as my major there. And then engineering at Brown, because it was just like a really good pairing to me. And I really just love like math and physics and science in general. So whoa, that's my background, which is not at all what I do now.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, a few things. So you kind of come from like a creative family. You said like your sister's a painter, your mom's a painter.
Yeah, my dad's a graphic designer, actually. So.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
In the blood.
Okay. Wow. And so was graphic design not really on your radar when you were younger? Like you were thinking like, oh, I'll study painting, and then like you've kind of found industrial design. But at any time were you like, maybe graphic design, or not really?
It crossed my mind. I mean, obviously I was aware of it because my dad's a graphic designer, right? So
right.
I knew it was an option. Between thinking I was going to be a painting and deciding I was going to do industrial design, I flirted with the idea of illustration for a while, which to me was kind of like the more technical version of fine art and like the more employable version
Right.
as well. So it was always kind of on my radar, but not until I started sort of picking up the programs at school. And just like, I feel like a lot of people who listen to this podcast can probably relate to this. I was always like the art kid in my group of friends all through high school. Obviously that changed when I got to college. Everyone was an art kid, but
Right.
so all through high school, I was always like doing the posters for my friends' bands and like designing t-shirts for school functions and that kind of shit. So I was in people's minds as the art kid. So when people started to become adults and through college, everyone was like, hey, I wonder if my friend Danica in high school can like make me this logo for my like pet project.
Right.
So I just started doing graphic design on the side for fun. And then, I mean, I had some internships where it started to come in handy, and I learned a lot of like Illustrator through those internships, and I was using it a little bit in my industrial design stuff. So I just kind of like picked up all the skills on the side. And it wasn't until like well after I graduated that I actually started even thinking about doing it professionally.
Right. So, but you didn't you didn't just like jump into like starting your own studio. You worked for a while like in-house and did some different things like that.
Yeah, so basically I graduated from college and immediately moved to California, where I had no connections at all, and was struggling to find a job in industrial design or engineering, which is ironic because everyone said when I explained that those are my majors field, they're like, oh, you're gonna get a job so
Right.
easily.
Yeah, that sounds like, I don't know, like a better route than painting for like
Right.
finding a career.
Right. But I had all these graphic design skills in my back pocket. So, I had that on my resume, and I ended up getting in with a temp agency just because I was like, I need work, like whatever the work is, I'll take it at this stage. And funnily enough, a guy at Spy, which is where I ended up working for a long time, he was from Connecticut and recognized RISD on my resume. We're like, no one else on the West Coast really cares about it. But he saw it and he was like, oh, RISD's a legit school. We should hire her to do, of all things, photo editing, like on a temp basis. So it was very much like part-time photo editing, which of all of my like graphic design skills at the time was absolutely like, Photoshop was by far my worst of all those programs. But yeah, they hired me on, Spy hired me on, and it was very much like trial by fire. They brought me in, and Chris, the director of photography at the time, who's now a good buddy of mine, was like, hey, can you edit these? And I was like, yeah, totally. And I'm like Googling like how to make a looking mask, like I'm like how to use the pen tool in Photoshop. Like it was definitely trial by fire. But yeah, it ended up going really well, and I worked there for like 3 years full time. They, hired me on full time as a real employee, and nice. I ended up doing a lot more than just photo editing. And it was great. It was a good experience. It was an awesome way to sort of like understand the industry standard and make a bunch of connections.
Right.
And they're a super fun company to work for.
Yeah, that's cool. And just for those listening, Spy is like a glasses company, like they make like sunglasses.
Yeah, they're kind of like, I usually describe them as an action sports company because they're heavy into like the surfing, motocross, snowboarding, skiing space. Oh, okay. But yeah, it's primarily sunglasses and goggles. It's like the main thing that they do.
Right. So that's sort of like how you got started in graphic design, was like learning by doing at Spy.
Absolutely, I would say so. And I had always sort of like pushed against going into graphic design full time, even though that's clearly where the universe is pushing me. I had always kind of pushed back against it because I was like, it's not like problem solving enough. And so that was when I was at Spy, I was still feeling that. I was like, I don't know if I want to do this full time because I'm just like, banging out marketing materials, and like it just didn't feel like it was very challenging, like mentally. So that's kind of, I was at Spy and was like, okay, this is fine. It's paying the bills. It's fun. It's a good job. I'm learning a lot of like new skills, but I don't feel like mentally challenged. So that's where I was at before starting the studio.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting that you like studied engineering. You really have that, like, I don't know if it's right brain or left brain or whatever, but like the more like the more like technical side of things, because I really relate to that. Like my undergrad, I like majored in math, which was super random.
Interesting.
And when I
like tell people that I'm a graphic designer that it always seems like a complete, like you couldn't be further from what I studied, which is like mostly true. But I feel like a lot of it still applies. Like if you're good at things like math and physics and engineering, and like if you have a bit of a creative side, you'll be like a good graphic designer because it's a lot of like problem solving.
Exactly. I feel like it's not like a well-defined field, graphic design, because there's so many ways to go with it,
Right.
but a lot of it is, even if you're just designing, a layout of something, there's a lot of visual problem solving. And once you get deeper into like brand identity and strategy, there's a ton of like in-depth problem solving, and you really have to be thinking like a solutions focused person. So there's a ton of overlap in my mind. I totally agree.
Yeah, that's cool. So now you just full-time run Finletter Creative.
Mhm.
And was that like a big jump to be like, okay, I'm going to leave my job and start this? Or were you kind of already doing some freelancing, or what was that like?
It was a unique situation. I don't want to say I was like forced into going freelance, but I was like, circumstances pushed me hard in that direction. My husband at the time was in the military, so we were living in Southern California. He was with the Marines there, and I was working in Southern California, and then we unexpectedly got orders to Okinawa, Japan. So all of a sudden I was like, oh shit, I'm moving to Japan.
Crazy.
Yeah. So this is pre-COVID. Remote work was like not really super normal. So I went to SPY and I was like, hey guys, like I really like working here, but I'm moving to Japan for 3 years. So, and they're like, we'd love to keep you on, but we can't. And I was like,
Wow.
totally get it. I had, always thought about going freelance, but I never had the push. Like to me, I was like, comfortable at the job at SPY. But this was the push. This was like absolutely the galvanizing factor.
I mean, that sounds like a pretty big push.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's like kind of unique circumstances. So I was like, well, this is the best option I have for work. This is what I'm going to do, and just kind of like jumped into it 2 feet first as soon as I found out that's what was happening. And that was 4 years ago.
That was 4 years ago. Okay, wow.
Mhm.
And so you were in Japan for 3 years, and now you're back.
Yeah, we were there just under 3 years, but yeah, I was talking about life changes, like moving across the world, starting a company, quitting my job. Like it was pretty crazy at the time.
That's cool though. I mean, I feel like oftentimes that's how it goes for people. Like you said, it's like a push that you kind of needed to like get started.
Yeah, I'm always like a little embarrassed by that, because it's like, I don't know, especially when for people starting out, it's like, yeah, I want to be a graphic designer. I'm like, well, I just kind of accidentally fell into it. But I'm a big believer in like everything happens for a reason, and I don't want to say fate, but like all signs were pointing to this, and so here we are, and I love it. So it really worked out.
Oh yeah, because I was gonna ask you this, kind of backtracking a little bit. You enjoyed industrial design. It's not like you were like, I don't like this and I want to do something instead. It was just like you couldn't find work. You ended up getting this temp thing at SPY, and it just worked out that way.
Exactly. Yeah, it's pretty funny how the universe has its way of pushing you in a direction that you don't think you're going to go to. But yeah.
So Japan, I mean, I don't really I actually looked up because you were in Okinawa, right?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that existed. It's like a whole separate island from the rest of Japan.
Yep.
It looks beautiful.
It's like what Hawaii is to the States, basically. It's a tropical island. It's beautiful. But it's definitely like, you say you're moving to Japan, people are like, oh, Tokyo? And you're like, no, not exactly. It's like, it's definitely out there.
Yeah.
Basically equidistant between like Taiwan and mainland Japan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So what was like, I don't know, the biggest kind of like difference that you found there, like in terms of the culture, the lifestyle, whatever, that compared to life in the States?
There's so much to unpack, but like Japan and America are so different. Obviously the language is like the clearest one. But as a designer, it was an awesome source of inspiration for me, because it's like just aesthetically, it's a beautiful language, right? There's 3 different alphabets. They're all these like incredible, cool looking characters.
Yeah.
So that was really fun for me as a designer, especially someone who was just getting into lettering at the time, to like explore that. That's obviously the biggest difference. But I mean, culturally, in Japan, like it's cleaner. You don't have to lock your doors. It's super safe. Like people are super polite. And you just always feel like an outsider as an American.
Right.
Like for better or for worse, there's everyone's really, really kind, but you'll never like really be accepted just because it's such an insular culture. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And
That was my experience, at least. I shouldn't like say that that's the case for everyone, but
for sure.
yeah.
Did like a lot of people in Okinawa speak English, or?
Yeah, there's a fair number of English speakers. So the thing about Okinawa is that there are a bunch of American military bases on it, which is why we were there. So it's kind of this like Okinawa is this very interesting place culturally because it's this amalgamation of Japanese culture, American culture, and like Chinese culture, because it was originally I'll probably totally butcher the history here, but basically it was like originally its own kingdom called the Ryukyu Islands, I guess, closer to Chinese culture. And then Japan took it over, and then the US took it from Japan for a little while, and then gave it back to Japan after World War II, so on and so forth. So culturally, it's really interesting that there's like this melding of worlds. So back to your point, like, yeah, a fair amount of the local population spoke a little bit of English, but then there's also like this huge American population, which is kind of weird. It's like kind of nice and kind of terrible at the same time.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it was a really unique experience. It's a cool place.
That's so cool. So do you miss it? Like, do you think you'll ever go back?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that I miss and so much that I'm happy to be back for, I guess, if that makes sense. Okinawa specifically is just like, everywhere you look, there's like bright blue water and beaches. It's gorgeous. And Japan, again, like the food, the culture, the language, there's so much awesome stuff there. There's a lot to be said for feeling comfortable in your element, though, I guess. It kind of just comes back to the fact that like I was never able to fully feel like I could like really be myself there, just because, I mean, for a variety of reasons. A lot of it has to do with like being associated with the military community, which has its own challenges. Not being able to really like communicate well. I spoke a little bit of Japanese, but not enough to like communicate my personality,
Sure. Yeah.
So I don't miss feeling like that. I guess I should say I don't miss feeling like I couldn't like be comfortable and be myself, but I do really miss like a lot of the things about living there that were great.
Okay, switching gears a little bit.
Absolutely.
So you're like a semi-serious rock climber. Is that?
Yeah, I would say it's my biggest hobby. I'm not that good at it, but I really enjoy it. I've been doing it for a long time.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Because what was I gonna say? Oh, right. So because you've done some work for the Honnold Foundation, and
Yeah.
curious how you got involved in that. I'm a kind of huge Alex Honnold like fanboy.
Yeah, he's a pretty cool guy. I got involved with them through a friend, an old friend from California, one of my climbing buddies, who moved out to Salt Lake City and just is like the friendliest person in the world and a great climber. So he fairly quickly built a climbing crew there. And one of those people was at the time the executive director of the Honnold Foundation. And this is honestly this is how I get so much of my work. It's like a friend of a friend mentions like, oh, I work for this company and we need this thing. And then another friend's like, oh, you should talk to my friend Danica. So that's pretty much how it happened. Is Cody, my buddy, was friends with someone who worked there, and they mentioned that they needed some help with like an ad, or like it was something super basic. And so they reached out, and it went well, and I just continue to help them out with like a lot of their basic collateral needs, since they don't have an in-house designer. Yeah, it's a super awesome team. They're really good people.
Man, that's so cool.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like a dream client.
Yeah, it really is. It was pretty. I definitely had a moment of shock when I realized. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get to do work for the Honnold Foundation. Are you kidding me?
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, have you ever actually like spoken to Alex?
No,
This
we
is just
haven't-
me
we
being
haven't
a fan of this point. It's not even relevant.
No, we haven't met, unfortunately. I did design some of his Instagram stories once. That's about as close as we've gotten. Yeah, I usually just interface with they have a small team for the foundation specifically, but I have been told that, they're like, hey, Alex saw the impact report and he said it was awesome. He's super stoked. So, there's stuff like that. I get my little like proximity to fame here and there.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Well, I was gonna ask this. This is kind of random, but I was on your Twitter and I saw that you shared this article. What's that?
I have like 2 followers on Twitter, I think.
Well, you have some good tweets. You should have more followers. So everyone go follow Danica on Twitter. But yeah, anyway, so you tweeted this article that was called "When Did Design Stop Being Multidisciplinary?" And you said down with the niche. Why do you say down with the niche? And like as someone maybe who came from like an industrial design background and then does graphic design and like maybe a few different things, like what are your thoughts on that whole topic?
It's such the niche conversation is such a double-edged sword, because like there's obviously so much value in niching down. But like for me as an individual, like who I am, I just cannot get myself to do it. I'll describe it like this. Like for me, like my favorite foods are like sushi and tapas, when you can like try everything. And like I have like 500 pairs of shoes. Like I'm the kind of person that really thrives on variety. I get like very bored doing the same thing over and over again, which is part of the reason why my portfolio is kind of all over the place. But I'm kind of a strong believer. And again, this is not necessarily an argument that everyone should say fuck it and not try to niche down, because it clearly is really effective for some people. And if it works for you and you like if you have the thing that you love to do and you never get sick of it, like absolutely fucking do it, because like that's definitely a moneymaker too.
Yeah.
But for me, I think that like if you are true enough to like what lights you up and your own taste, there like a niche will sort of naturally develop, which is kind of what I've found slowly but surely. I don't even want to say found. I've been in the process of finding and probably will forever be in the process of finding. But
right.
It sounds stupid coming from someone who does like brand strategy and identity, right? Because you're always trying to think about the target audience and appealing to them. But in terms of doing my own work, the common thread is like my values and my taste. Even though I work with a variety of companies and I have like a few different kinds of things that I do, that common thread still exists. It's just not like super clear. I'm not like the go-to person for like cat illustrations. Actually, there is someone who does this and they're amazing. They're like landscape cat illustrations, and that's all she does, and they're so cool, and she has like 1 million followers on Instagram, and I'm sure she does great.
That's sick.
I could just never do that.
Yeah.
So that's a very roundabout way of saying just like I don't think that should be the gospel. You know, it doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah. Agreed.
No,
I mean it's interesting, and I think like you said, it's a double-edged sword, because it's probably good advice to tell people to have a niche, because it'll help them in their career. But if you're just not gonna be happy doing that, and if you have different things that excite you, like probably don't stop yourself from doing them all. But I don't know.
Yeah, I think also, especially with people just starting out, if you encourage them, if they're constantly hearing like you have to niche down, they might miss an opportunity to find what they really love to do, because they're like, oh, I have to choose a niche, I have to go into this one thing now, and then get themselves like in that path and realize like, oh wait, I really wish I had explored lettering or photo editing, whatever the other thing is. But like at a certain point, I don't want to say it's too late, it's never too late, but at a certain point it's harder. I don't know, I think exploring, especially early in your career, is just like so important to figuring out what you actually want to do. So
well, it's sort of like what you were saying they do at RISD. It's like foundations. We do like everything. And you were interested in one thing, and then you found another that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise found if you were sort of niching into your own thing. So yeah, I definitely agree. Like especially early on. Try everything.
Yeah, totally. Variety is the spice of life.
Okay, and the last thing, well, I don't know if it's the last thing, but so you have done some writing for Brand New, the blog. How did you get involved in writing these like guest posts on the Brand New site?
I started reading Brand New just a few years ago, kind of when I got serious about branding in my own career. And it was during COVID, and I just like, that was like my morning routine. I'd like get up, I'd have my coffee, I'd go to my computer, and I'd like check out Brand New. And I just started posting a lot of comments, like not with any purpose in mind, but like if I had an opinion or something I thought was like funny or useful or whatever, I'd post it. And eventually it got to the point where I got an email from Armin, and he was just like, hey, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was basically along the lines of like, I've noticed in the comments that you can form complete sentences. Would you be interested in writing a guest post? Something like that. So he just reached out because I was being vocal in the comments, I guess. But it was great. Yeah, I started by doing like a reviewed, is that what we're calling it? Revisited post for him. It was this idea that Armin had to sort of like look back on rebrands that had happened 5 or 6 years ago or more, and have guests sort of take a look at how they've held up, how that rebrand has held up over time, and any new installments in the brand. So he kind of said like, hey, go back at least 5 years or 2 years, whatever it was, choose something that you'd be interested in writing a revisited article on. So I wrote about Chobani, and it was like super fun and cool, and Armin is awesome to work with. That came out, and then a few months later he had the Brand New conference, and he needed basically just some help writing the regular reviewed post. So he reached out to a handful of us to jump in on that. And then I actually just got an email from him a couple days ago, and I think I'm going to be writing once a month now, so that'll be cool.
Oh, cool! That's so exciting.
Yeah, it should be pretty fun.
Yeah, I was going through like your Chobani. With the revisited idea is pretty cool. I like it a lot, because like it's one thing when a company gets a new logo or they redo all their identity, but most of like the story really comes after, once it's like been existing in the world for a few years.
Exactly.
But no, your article is like actually massive. It's like
so long.
Yeah, like it's actually
so much longer than it was supposed to be. But there's so much to cover.
And like clearly a lot of work went into that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're a really good writer. Like, do you find that is that something you like learned at some point along the way, or that just sort of comes naturally to you?
I've always really loved writing, at least for the kind of work that I do. It's really important to be able to write, especially if you're working on like really fully developing brands, down to like how they sound and what they say. So yeah, writing, I love doing it. I've always kind of enjoyed it, but writing on Brand New has been actually a really nice way to do that, because I don't have a lot of opportunities to write long form. Like rarely am I just gonna like sit down and write because I feel like it. So I appreciate that you say that. That's super nice. But yeah, Brand New's been a good place for me to keep that skill sharp.
Yeah. That's exciting that you're going to be writing once a month. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, it's not officially yet, but hopefully we make it all work. So yeah, keep an eye out for that.
Cool. Well, yeah, I'll keep my eye out on that. And I think that's a good note to end on.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. This was fun.
Okay, I'm glad. Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Graphic Design is Fun podcast. If you enjoy the show, you can leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and we'll see you in the next one.